Dear viewers, our guest today is Mr. Joaquin Flores, the editor-in-chief of Fortress News, and also he is the director of Belgrade-based Center for Syncretic Studies. Mr. Flores, welcome to this interview.
Thank you for having me today. Good to be with you.
We know that you have been the editor-in-chief of Fortress News, which was attacked, which fell the victim of cyber attack of the Western forces. So, and that resulted in a current suspension of this site. So, will you please tell our audience that what happened with this Fortress News?
Yes. Well, after number of years, 5 or 6 years of reporting much information as accurately as possible from the conflict in Ukraine, ultimately we succumbed to a series of cyber attacks, which I think, in addition to death threats, in addition to multiple inquiries and investigations from the United States Department of State and the Treasury Department and the U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, altogether, it looked like this seemed to be far more of a cost to do basic journalism, to do basic fact-seeking than the risks would allow for. I think reasonably, I think you and I both very much know what that's all about. Indeed, it's really a shame. These attacks on speech are attacks on all of us, and you know, this is information that, of course, people were free to oppose, sir. People were free to write in and offer corrections if we made errors, and we always made them. So this had nothing to do with our accountability and everything to do with the uncomfortable truths that we were exposing in the conflict in Ukraine, going back to 2014 and 15, sir. So yes.
You have been paying a very high price for your courage and telling the truth. And actually, same thing happened with me. I was thrice imprisoned in my country just for the crime of telling the truth. And even just recently, 2 weeks ago, there was an open threat on Twitter by the jihadis. They said that if I'm found, to slaughter me. So this is the situation that we are living in. But I mean, why we journalists are now becoming the target of the Western forces, or let's say the hostile forces? I mean, journalism is not a crime. Why we are being treated like criminals?
You know, it's uncomfortable truths is all I can really say. And we live in a time when information is understood to have a high value. Information shapes narratives. It shapes even consciousness. It tells us and informs much of our thinking about the world around us. And maybe they perceive that as even more dangerous than soldiers with guns on a battlefield, because if the populations in various countries have a different perspective than the militants or the warmongers in power, then that's a very big problem for them, because many of these societies, whether or not they are constitutional republics, still many of these societies must be responsible to their citizens, whether it's a monarchy who's popular, whether it is any type of government, they must be responsible to their citizens. And if the citizens have a different opinion about something so big like a conflict, well, then we're going to unfortunately find intelligence agencies, governments, and even big corporations directly target journalists. And I don't mean just their operation, but really actually target their livelihood and their lives.
In your news outlet, Fortress News, there have been many journalists also working. So, I mean, by shutting down this news outlet, it's an attempt of making a lot of journalists unemployed. This is also a big hostility. And the Western world is always talking about freedom of press, freedom of expression, and what we are seeing, like independent news outlet like Fortress News has to be, forced to be shut down due to this cyber terrorist attack. And then there are elements of the Western forces such as NewsGuard, which is consistently threatening every independent media. Last week, they even threatened me why I have published news about Ukraine and Russia. I mean, it seems like we cannot tell the truth. They want us to parrot what they want to be told to the world. I mean, don't you think, as a senior journalist, it's a kind of the grand insanity going on with all of us?
Well, it's certainly a sign of the times. Um, what more can we say? These are very difficult times. The world is changing at a very fast pace. There are new geopolitical and economic alignments that are coming into being. And while there will be many good changes, it will also be difficult for some people. And I'm from the United States, I'm an American citizen. And the truth is that the United States has lost its preeminence as the sole global hegemon. And the truth is that much of the world, and congratulations to them, have actually gotten their stuff together and they've advanced and they've modernized. And today they are equal to or greater than the United States collectively. And so it's very normal that if the United States is fixated on proposing bad economic deals, then there are alternatives. And that's what competition and markets are really all about. And fortunately, many of these countries have been able to seek and find and create real alternatives to the global hegemonic rule, let's say, of the IMF or the World Bank. So these are, on the whole, positive developments, but I would consider these all growing pains or birth pains.
Mr. Flores, I would like to humbly ask you, when Fortress News fell victim of this cyber terrorist attack, did the organizations like Committee to Protect Journalists or Reporters Sans Frontières issue any statement in favor of your newspaper review?
These very well-known Sorosian NGOs, we definitely heard the deafening silence. I can tell you that the silence was deafening. Not surprised at all, that, not to hear anything about this. But I can tell you that our many thousands and thousands of readers have been writing and have assured us that they're waiting for us to come back. And, the technical means exist for that. And I'm not going to say what I'm planning, but anything is possible.
So, I mean, it's an insanity. I mean, CPJ, Committee to Protect Journalists, just last week, they published a report against us for exposing activities of a terrorist in UK. I mean, as if now we journalists are becoming criminals, and those NGOs like CPJ or whatever, Human Rights Watch, etc., they are even now, they have also started considering us as criminals. So before we switch to the next question, Mr. Flores, I'd like to ask when we can see Fortress News again resume its publication.
Well, like I said, I don't discuss my future plans, but anything is possible. The technical means for this now exist. I can say that. And I might even consider that a warning to some of my opponents out there. But, for now, we'll just say that we are, in the low profile mode.
But we look forward to seeing Fortress News again resume back to its journalism, independent journalism. Now, as you know that there are certain propagandas going on in the Western media about the Russia-Ukraine war, and of course this kind of the media propaganda that when they say Putin is dying, Putin has cancer, Putin is dead, but now Putin is a very healthy person and he is going to contest for the 2024 presidential election and win. So, yeah. I mean, as a senior journalist, how do you see this kind of the state patronized propaganda targeting the president of a sovereign nation?
It's ridiculous. I think what you were alluding to is about a month ago, a very big conspiracy theory that Putin was ill, that he was dying. And this is something, we hear this about big world leaders often. It's a very strange type of a conspiracy theory. I call it a call for proof of life, which is what is basically meant is that the person who's saying, the people who are saying that someone else is ill or is sick, if they can get the person they're accusing of being sick to clarify and say, no, I'm fine, here I am, they've actually won. So this is called a proof of life kind of request, and it's meant to have a person answer the call, right? So that establishes the power relationship. Like, you must appear when we say that you're missing, right? The truth is that people aren't missing. They have work to do. They might speak to journalists once a week or every couple of weeks. The rest of the time, they're busy working. They're not sick. They're not dead. They're just at work. But most definitely, it's expected for Putin, who on many important metrics enjoys an over 80% approval rate around the conflict in Ukraine, still much over 60, 70% for sure. And these are the main issues, of course, in Russian society. And it's expected that he should win this election coming up. And it's very strange, you know, when we think about other countries that try to control exactly who can be elected. And it's like they're quite afraid that some other country might wind up with a president similar to Putin, who places the national interest ahead of the interest of the global banking cartels. And I think that Putin as a leader, and you know, every leader has his problems, and every country has its problems. We're not creating fantasies or utopias here. The place here is not to talk about all of Putin's problems, because we can turn on the news and see that all the time. What isn't being discussed are many of the strengths. And like you said, we were entered into this conflict hearing that Russia was going to collapse at any moment. And looking at the watch now and looking at the media now, all we see is that we're wondering how much longer does Ukraine have? You know, how much longer, how many more dollars does Ukraine have to spend?
What makes Mr. President Vladimir Putin kind of the fearful character to the eyes of Joe Biden and his Western cronies? I mean, why the Western nations are so much afraid of Vladimir Putin?
Because he can't be purchased.
Only? Anything else?
Well, you know, that's the beginning of the end. You know, once you can't be purchased, you know, then the sky's the limit, as they say. And I think that because he can't be purchased, well, why would they want to purchase him, right? They want to divide Russia up. And these are long studied and published plans. The Atlantic Council has for a long time promoted the division of Russia into at least 14 countries. Western NGOs have been financing contests for high school and university students in the area of international relations to come up with the best plan. Students from, let's say, Georgia or Azerbaijan, or students from Ukraine or from Latvia are encouraged to come up with plans of how would we divide Russia into 10 or 20 more countries, and not thinking about how those processes of dividing and dividing and dividing have taken place in the Balkans, from which we have the term Balkanization. And no one thinks that this leads to more stability, more prosperity, or more development. These things constantly lead to more war, more confusion, and micro-ethnic enmities, which really have no place in today's world. And I think that this is why they so very much find Putin to be the extreme problem that they find him to be. Yes.
When you and I are talking, it's December, and we know that on November 5th, the US will be having his presidential election. So technically, Joe Biden doesn't have more than 11 months actually in the office, and it is well anticipated that he is not going to either. Maybe he will not be re-running for the election, or he will be badly defeated by anyone from the Republican Party. But say it is also assumed that Donald Trump is going to become the US president, next US president, or whoever, not Joe Biden. Anyone other than Joe Biden becoming the US president next year, this time, actually last month of next year, do you think that kind of the hostility of the United States toward the world, even in my own country, Bangladesh, it will be a bit ratified or decreased?
That's a very good question. I think that it would be very difficult for anyone to defeat Biden except for Trump, not because anyone likes Biden and not because other candidates couldn't defeat him by a margin, but the voter fraud organization that the Democratic Party has established in the United States is so extensive that someone like Trump, and I think uniquely Trump, would need to win almost 2/3 of of the entire vote in order to show like 54% or 53%. So that's the complication we have in the United States, is that many of our democratic norms have been greatly eroded. And this is largely, again, because of independent journalism. It goes back to independent journalism. If you care, I can explain.
Yeah, we have seen for decades, actually, for that United States and the Western nations were using sanctions on various nations in the world. And now with this recent latest example of the sanctions on Russia, which has already fallen flat, sanctions have become toothless. Now they have come with a new weapon, which is called visa restriction. They have already imposed visa restrictions on my country. I mean, some people in my country, and they're threatening that they will be imposing visa restriction on anyone. And so a journalist asked me a few weeks ago that what I think about the visa restrictions. I think, okay, if United States imposes visa restrictions, I will be very happy. I don't want to spend my money to go to US. I will go to Russia. I will go to China and many other countries. What makes? I mean, it's nothing special going. I've been to US many a times, so many times, and the most boring place in the world. So we don't care. We don't care. You and I. Okay, say there is a visa restriction on you or me. What's the problem? I will go to you. You will come to Bangladesh. We'll go to Moscow. We'll go to Beijing. We'll go to Delhi. So they are using newer and newer and newer tools of intimidation.
But they're running out of sticks. They're running out of these things.
Running out, but they are doing. They are trying. From sanction to visa restriction, and also one of the things that I say they say freezing the assets and foreign assets. I call it's a kind of the acts of the Al Capone. I mean, what America and the Western nations are doing with Russia, it's a broad day robbery. How can you freeze the assets of a sovereign nation? Who gives you the right? No one approved United States or any other country to be the global police. So, I mean, how, Mr. Flores, we can get liberated from such sort of hostility? Please tell us.
The United States has limited options. The new sanctions that they're trying to do, whether it's visa restrictions, all of these are coping mechanisms. The collapse of the effort to contain Russia already occurred. When what happened? Well, countries that don't necessarily get along with each other, India and China, both have rejected. And we talk about India and China, just for your Western viewers in particular, you're talking about countries that represent over a third of the world population right there, just between India and China. This is phenomenal, okay? So the idea that you can contain Russia from from the so-called international community, you're just talking about some EU countries, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the United States. I can't think of anyone else. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan. I mean, so what? So this is where we are, and the rest of the world says, this conflict in Ukraine can and should be a whole lot smaller and end a whole lot sooner. So provided and as soon as the United States can get over this fantasy that it's going to be calling shots in Eastern Europe, or it's going to be, reshaping the world and its image in the way we know the neocons had imagined it could, nation building, state building, all of these fantasies are ghosts of the past, sir. And I think that it is fine time that the world recognizes the good news. The good news is that things are going better than they could have been overall in the world. Countries have broken out, by and large, of the dollar as the only, no one dislikes the dollar. We all love dollars, but we want choices. We want dollars, we want renminbi, we want everything, right? We want it all. We want a basket of currencies. That's how things are going to be in the world moving forward. And all that we need now is sane leadership in Europe, in Great Britain, in the United States, to just recognize that the world grew up. And as soon as we recognize that, it'll be a lot easier.
You know that Biden has been frantically trying to get more and more and more countries into his Quad or AUKUS, but very fortunately, the response is very poor. But we have seen recently during this recent South Africa conference of BRICS that a lot of countries, including my country, Bangladesh, they want to join BRICS enthusiastically. Enthusiastically, they want to join because they understand the importance of the unity of the global South. I mean, when Biden is not getting a passenger for Quad, BRICS is struggling in accommodating the applicants. So, I mean, as a journalist, you also may be feeling encouraged. Okay, this is the sign that we need to actually stand united, stand firm, and global South needs to be really becoming a major voice in the whole world. Actually, we are dominant in economy, we are dominant in manpower, we are population, we are dominant in technology everywhere. For example, for your kind information, in information artificial intelligence, United States now today is far behind than China.
Yes.
We are progressing, and this is now that we need more and more unity, not only unity between the politicians, but unity between the business people, unity between the journalists of the global South is very important. Do you agree with me?
I do agree with you. That's a very fine point that you make. And yes, I think to elaborate on that, I would say that the role of journalism today is to understand, number one, how important it is to serve the public. Whenever I look at CNN or BBC, Washington Post, I can't imagine what it must be like to have the job that your job is to lie to your own clients, to your own consumers, to your own customers, to your own citizens. When I think about a doctor, right, who's taken that Hippocratic oath, and I think about journalism very seriously and very similarly, this is an oath to present things that might undermine our very own narrative. Sometimes the truth hurts. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. Our obligation is to get it to the public because only an informed public can make the right decisions about their lives, about what's going on in politics, about what's going on in society as well. So I very much agree with your point.
So for the sake of unity among the journalists in the global South, I mean, against those NGOs like CPJ and RSS and whatever, do you think there is a necessity that we journalists in the global South form our own platform where we can stand together and united?
Platforms, multiple platforms, sometimes one platform can be attacked. But I think that what is so resilient about the voices, journalists, analysts from BRICS countries or from the global South at large is that it is a network, right? Not one single platform, but an agreement on certain principles, let's say. And on those principles, they can attack here the globalists and the IMF and the people connected to the City of London and Wall Street. Well, they can attack here, they can attack there. But a net or a network is very resilient to these things. And so yes, it definitely multiple platforms around basic ideas, around basic journalistic principles, I think is very much called for, yes.
Yeah, especially for example, the cruelty on fortress news. I mean, many people in many countries within the BRICS and even the global South may not be aware. So we actually need, as you said, yes, a group of a series of organizations, but it should be coordinate so that we can share our problems, we can face our problems, and at the same time, we can also sometimes make serious decisions of countering the Western propaganda against the global South. Before we conclude, I would like to ask your valued opinion about what you see as the consequence of the current war between, Russia's special military operations in Ukraine. What do you see?
Well, I have many contacts directly inside of Moscow, and I also put a lot of thought into the subject as well. Educationally, my background is in geopolitics and international relations. Journalism became a vehicle to which to kind of update the world about these developments. So as a geopolitical analyst as well, and with a long background in looking at war and conflict, and in consultation with a number of insiders I have in Moscow, it seems to me that absolutely Russia will need to liberate, as they would say in their discursive framework, the Kharkov region as well. There's also a strong chance that Mykolaiv and Odessa will also fit into the operation. And so this is something that I think will continue for at least another 10 to 15 months. At the present rate, it is difficult to say that, but when you look at the collapse of the Ukrainian front and the end of their finances, then you can look at the higher chances of a quicker Russian advance through those areas and the stronger likelihood of semi-organized capitulation, at least at the local level by local commanders of the Ukrainian force. And we saw that, of course, in 2014 as well. So there are examples to draw upon in which we may see that again.
Dear viewers, it was not an interview because Mr. Joaquin Flores is a very eminent journalist and editor, and I'm also editor. So consider it as a conversation between two editors. We try to understand, and we will be, hopefully, we can have Mr. Joaquin Flores in the future also to discuss. And Mr. Flores, I know you are extremely busy, and still you have kindly given us time, and please accept a profound gratitude from me and the entire team of Blitz.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be with you.